Okay, so I'm looking at Silverton, and this is a game that I don't know, some guys we knew from Rochester introduced us to. They were into a number of things. I remember playing fast food for the first time with them TV wars. A lot of the lighter stuff, but they were up for heavier games. This was definitely one of the heavier things that we played with them. They came up to Buffalo, I guess because they couldn't find enough gaming. It's funny because later we used to go to Rochester for the same reason. There was a group over at Crazy Igor's. They used to game. Anyway, I was introduced to that first version. A friend of mine ended up picking it up, a local friend, and I borrowed it from him for a while. And really fell in love with it, but didn't know how to get it. And then this second edition, incidentally, I found in Rochester at Igor's, and I was very happy to pick one up. I was a little saddened that it was second edition because I do like the first edition map better. The second edition with its tiny, it's harder to read, that's all. Although there may be some improvements to the game, actually. Component-wise, you've got a pretty good set here. The map, one of these puzzle boards. I'm not a big fan of puzzle boards, and like I said, I don't like the font, but you've got all these little chips to track the different size groupings of commodities. The cards in the second edition deck are much, much better. The first edition had kind of paper cards you shuffle together. Money's actually very good. It's the Mayfair style of money that came out for the 18XX games. It was really great. Wooden pieces, I think these came with the original as well. I think it was the first game I saw with little wooden cubes and everything, right? So, one of the first things you kind of note with this game... Oh, and then the expanded map. Doing that with the original was kind of a pain in the butt because you had like a different sheet that you had to use. There was like this was on the board, I think, on the original, and then you had a separate sheet that came out with the expansion that you used instead. So there was something very weird going on with that. It just felt kind of funny. But here you've got one of these games that just, it's, there's something so almost intuitively obvious about it. You kind of ask yourself, why didn't I design that? Now, I did ask myself that, and I can come to a pretty good answer of why I didn't design it. The guy who made this game put the effort in, Philip J. Smith, he put the effort in to really research the subject. Thinking up the base idea of how to represent the mining. Die rolls for the mines, they might crap out, they produce commodities, you get them on little chips, you gotta haul them places. The further you gotta haul them, the bigger a train you need. Although there is something kind of weird to me about the distance just being the largest distance piece. So what's weird there is some of those large distances seem to be more about you're passing over really, really bad terrain. But some of the moderate-sized distances actually appear to be relatively flat terrain over a long distance. I don't feel that a bunch of shorter distance segments of track is really easier to travel over than one longer one. Maybe I'm missing something here, which is to do with refueling or something, but even so, it doesn't seem too hard to imagine that if you had the longer track, you would actually build refueling stations along it, or something along that line. So as long as the terrain's good, I'm a little weird about this distance concept, because there's some very small track pieces that are in fairly mountainous terrain. Now they may be clear, they may not require any great inclines or anything like that,
but some of the stuff in the Rockies, very clearly in the Rockies, looks like it's very cheap, like not 2 but 4 distance or whatever. Whereas some of the longer paths there go up to 9. Well, the longer paths elsewhere are around a 6 or maybe a 5, and I'm not sure what's being represented there, because it doesn't make sense that you need more train power to haul the weight across a flat distance. Now, it does make sense total distance that you would need that, but it doesn't really make sense in that. That's one of the real little complaints I have about it, that I don't know, maybe I just don't know what's being represented there. It would be nice to have designer notes. It's one shame about the game, except that so much of it is so absolutely intuitive. You just look at it and you say, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. And the only thing I feel like I'm missing in terms of having been able, to put something together there, is the sweat and blood in terms of doing that research and getting it all together. And obviously, if you read I'm not going to pull it out, but the notes from the designer's wife, she was involved in putting this out for him posthumously. The first edition, I think, came out during his lifetime. But, this was something he really worked at. He slaved over. And obviously it wasn't slaving over the mechanisms, right? And that's a big difference between something like this and some of the Euros. Well, the Euros, you could sit around in bed and try to think of something clever, come up with it, and you have a game in, a few hours, really. Sure, you have to tweak it, you have to get it perfect and everything, and that could take months. But that's not the same as this, which almost you could make a lifetime trying to perfect getting those numbers right to represent the reality, and still trying to keep balance in play and fiddling with other things to match those numbers. And that's something that's just so clearly missing in most of the Euros. You look at them and you say, okay, but I just don't believe it, I just don't believe it any more than I believe Risk or than I believe Axis and Allies. I feel like somebody kinda had a cool idea and off on a shoestring designed a game without really doing the legwork involved. And certainly you can do that with like a fantasy game with, no limitations. You gotta write Warrior Knights, great, you can make it perfectly symmetrical, la la la. Well, but you can't do that with, say, War of the Ring, right? Anyway, that's probably the clearest thing about this game, is that it is just so intuitively graspable of what's going on. There may be a little fiddly bits and everything, but everything except for that one little piece makes absolute sense to me. Some of it you can look at, yeah, okay, maybe there was a game compromise here to make it a little simpler with the prospectors. The one disappointment, though, that I have with the game, and I really do like it a great deal, the one disappointment has always been, hey, it doesn't have stocks. I was introduced to this after the 18XX experience, and what I wanted was, I want to capitalize these companies with, on the stock market. That's such an important part of railroading, and something that I just wanted to add to this, because in a way this was the game 18XX was not. 18XX is beautiful and clever and Euro-like. Maybe not as Euro-like as Euros are, but it had this level of abstraction and level of elegance to put it, above sort of the nitty-gritty, I'm going to get this, so that it makes sense. And the hell with making it a perfect game, although I think this is a pretty good game on top of everything else. But I don't have to make it, luckless. I don't have to make it fair, I don't have to worry about these things so much because I'm representing reality here, and reality is neither luckless nor fair. So, where am I? Yes. Anyway, I really wanted stock certificates in this. I really wanted to finance the companies that way. And that was one reason that I was so excited about Bullfrog Goldfield or whatever. And unfortunately, it's an interesting game, but it lacks this. It lacks that link to reality that doesn't have to be hard. This isn't a hard game to learn. It's not necessarily a hard game to play. It's not even necessarily a long game. I feel cheated if I play the short game, which takes a couple hours. I kind of even feel cheated if I play the long game, because it probably ends around turn 20, maybe a little before. Actually no, quite a bit before that, probably around turn 16. The long game, though, is still pretty good. And either the medium or short game, though, I just don't feel like you've got enough of the game in play. You don't have those big passenger rids coming down. Certainly not in the short game. They're not even in the game. They get withdrawn. But anyway, it is still probably enjoyable to most people who want a lighter game to play the shorter games. I want the big thing because I've had the big thing. And part of this game, part of it is that sitting back and being able to play the long game and enjoy the big picture that you're getting when you're playing it over a period of time, where you can plan for, long-term events instead of just trying to capitalize as quickly as you can off the silver market on any particular turn. So there's definitely, room, though, for many different kinds of players. There's many different scenarios. Mostly of note, there's these spike scenarios, which provide you with a very different kind of topography, where you're trying to connect two rails, and you're working from two directions. You have two separate markets, and once you link them, you get the bonus of being able to transfer goods across Colorado in that way. And we can see the more markets you hook up, the more impressive showing you can make on the game. Let me think about that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can certainly see a spike game holding 5 players. There's no spike game in here for 5 players. The biggest one's 4, but there's a way of playing it where you just let each player in turn, in order basically, select 2 starting cities. And that would actually hold up to 6. The problem with 6 is I don't think the map will support 6 players on a spike version. The reason is I'm thinking 2 Salt Lake City to Denver region ones, maybe 2 Denver to El Paso, Santa Fe, whatever. Although it's going to be tough to break that gap. But 2 players making that is possible. And maybe 1 from the El Paso to Salt Lake City run. Is there room for another one? Maybe. It's possible. Probably not 2 there, but you could say, well, you've got that Santa Fe extra location, and someone could kind of take a smaller spike route. In fact, multiple people might want to do that, where they say, okay, Santa Fe to Pueblo or Santa Fe to Denver. These are sweet. I can hook these up with much quicker and start making money earlier, and maybe spread out and do some impressive things. There is the possibility to kind of fall behind in the game very easily. We saw that with a couple of players. They ran out of money. It's their own stupid fault. Once you're used to the game, you won't do that. Hopefully. Unless you just can't avoid buying that thing that looks cool. It's not like they got cut off or hammered early, particularly, although green definitely got cut off by red. Red screwed them over in Aspen in the game that I just finished. But, yeah, you're kind of, you do hold your own fate in your hands. You could lose some important things that could have been big money makers that would allow you to keep going. But you can cut back and play a little bit more carefully if that's the case. Now, what we saw, though, in my game was the people who did cut back and played a little more carefully, they didn't finish in the top either. The people who ran away with the game are the ones who ended up in good places, not getting cut off, made their money, and were able to just keep rolling throughout the game. And that's just something you kind of have to accept with this game. You can collude together, you can make pacts, you can work in ways to help you gain an advantage on the leaders, and we didn't see that. We actually saw the leaders making deals with other people because they held the cards to be able to do so. Of course, whether white or yellow won the cross route over into Denver, we're talking the El Paso and Santa Fe players, well, Santa Fe, white, could have set themselves up for that right from the beginning. They didn't. Instead, they let the El Paso player get a shot in there. Their mistake, right? I mean, they could have closed that off themselves. They wanted the Santa Fe to El Paso route. They wanted to challenge directly. And that didn't work too well for them. And mainly because over in Santa Fe, you don't have as many opportunities to make money as you do in El Paso. So they probably misplayed their hand there. Although Santa Fe is a tough position to win out of, I think. Because El Paso is almost guaranteed a route through Santa Fe. And they've got the bigger shot after they make through that, unless Santa Fe pushes down. Salt Lake City is also heavily advantaged. And this is a biggie in the original game. In the original game, 6 players sat with 3 out of Denver Pueblo, 2 out of Salt Lake City, and 1 out of Santa Fe. Santa Fe is not a great place to start, but it's not so bad if you're not competing with El Paso and even if there's no southern map, right? Because you're shooting up north. You're not going to be in that Denver clusterfuck, but there's some interesting stuff down near you that other people aren't going to be involved in. 2 people over in Salt Lake City, that's not bad at all. So actually, I think this game might work better in 5 players. Get rid of the Santa Fe player. The Pueblo player then shoots down towards Santa Fe as the El Paso shoots up towards it. I don't like the Pueblo position either there, and to tell you the truth, one of the 2 Denver people is going to get track I'm not thrilled with as well, although we saw the guy who got the track that I love was green. He didn't have enough cash to cross it, because not a lot came out in his area early in the game. I almost always jump that route. That's my favorite route in the game, and I've seen the player with that be the main competitor with the Salt Lake City if there's 1 player there, and the El Paso, and usually it breaks into 3. Well, that whole eastern side of the map just didn't produce as hard as it usually does, especially that really, mountainous terrain going through things like Dillon and Fairplay, heavy on Leadville. He's the first guy into Leadville, so you can usually grab some mines there early. It just didn't happen in this game, mainly because he ran out of cash. He didn't get the early ones, so he didn't get the stuff near him. He was buying things like Aspen that he couldn't quite reach. Mistake? I don't know. He could have lucked into a better position, but he certainly overspent, I think, towards the end of his position. Anyway, there's a lot of opportunity in this game, and I think someone can study it and really kind of get a grasp of it better, but I don't think you need that to enjoy it. And I don't think you need to be winning to enjoy this game. So think about something like an 18XX. When you fall behind, it just feels like crap. I mean, there's nothing you can do. You end up with some doinker rail line that you can only run a limited amount for. All the other rails have already gone. You didn't have the money for them at their time. And you're just kind of running some old thing and you don't get to do anything. And that did happen in the end of this game. Blue and green definitely got to a place where all they could do is hope to fall into something that is right in their area. But it's only at the very end, and it's very, very hard in this game, unless you slit your own wrists, as we saw people do, by overstretching. It's not a matter that you just got outmaneuvered by other players, usually. Usually it's a matter that you didn't hold enough of a reserve, you overspent on stuff you couldn't reach, you didn't calculate right. And I'm not going to calculate well in a game that I'm playing solitaire for all 6 players. I'm just not going to be good at that. But when I'm sitting down at a game of this at the table, I don't feel like I have to think very hard. I do try to let other newer players at least understand, yeah, here's my views on what's important, because the game's no fun if it's cool if everybody's blind. It's no fun if there's a couple of people who know what's going on in it. So you kind of want to make them aware of where sort of the rich spaces are and what commodities are important, and you know certainly what the passenger routes are. But you know, they don't really. I don't feel like there's a huge advantage to experience in this game. It's more like Monopoly or Diplomacy. You almost have this or Outpost, or Age of Renaissance, where I don't have these things. But you almost have this innate ability to just sort of assess, yeah, I can make that, or no, I can't do that. Once you know where the rich spots are, there's not a lot more thinking to go on here. But I do often see the same people win even when put in bad positions. Yeah, even in Santa Fe, or you know, I mean, I can do well in Santa Fe against most groups that I've played with, or you know, in the Denver clusterfuck, you could say, well, this is what I want. And I'll tell people right at the front, I like that track, and here's why. But you can get there other ways, and it can be just as good, but this is the shortest way through. The least track builds. It's just the best. It hits all the stops that are important. And I can tell people that, and they still won't do it. They're still not terribly interested in it. They'll go chasing, you know, the all-weather route or whatever. And you can live with that too. We saw Green didn't do well. They ran out of money. All right. Anyway, this is a really cool game. I would definitely suggest, if you're at all into the economic and railroad side of things, and you're not totally into only, let's have an elegant system I can't understand, and the whole goal of the game is to try to get it before all my buddies do so I can beat them 4 or 5 times, and then, you know, we'll all be even because we'll all know it at that point. This isn't that way. This is a game that relies on luck. It relies on calculated risks. It relies on a lot of things that you may see different people winning different times. It's not guaranteed that you'll always see there won't be one best player in the way that, say, I would say happens in Monopoly or Diplomacy. But I don't know. It's a good deal of fun. A lot of dice rolling, and it can be you know, really enjoyable, especially when somebody gets hosed out in an important piece of rail, or even an important mine. All right.